Welcome to the Black Father's Pulse, the podcast where fatherhood meets purpose. I'm Dr. Alvin Thomas, clinical psychologist and professor, here to guide you through the multifaceted journey of Black fatherhood. Please note, the views expressed here are my own and not those of my employer. But get ready to dive into the dynamic world of Black fatherhood, where we celebrate the highs, tackle the lows, and share plenty of laughs along the way. Let's keep the pulse of fatherhood beating strong and vibrant. Welcome back to the Black Father's Pulse podcast. And we are here with a special guest who is actually going to help us relive some of our childhood memories. And once he starts talking about some of his previous work, all of you will have childhood memories flash back. So let's jump right into it. Today, we're talking about history, our connection to history, how we maintain history, but also the work that it takes for keeping history alive and making sure that our children and our communities are connected to history. And no better person than our guest today to help us think about the importance of history and the connection that we have to it. Ron Daise is the Emmy nominated co creator and star of Nickelodeon's, yes, Gullah Gullah Island. That was in 1994 to 1998. This was the first preschool show to feature a black family in an indigenously black community. Born on St. Helena Island, South Carolina, Ron has dedicated his life to preserving Gullah Geechee culture, the most intact West African culture in the United States. A former journalist, cultural educator, and author, Ron continues his preservation work through performances, writing, and his upcoming Geechee literature series. His pioneering work is more urgent than ever as Black history faces erasure in schools and nationwide. Ron, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast and welcome.
Thank you. It is a pleasure to be with you.
So, Ron, tell us first a little bit about what the reason was for Gullah Island. What does it feel like to know that Gullah Gullah Island touched millions of children?
It is a very rewarding feeling to know the impact that Gullah Gullah Island, a preschooler show from the 1990s, continues to have on people worldwide. Although it was filmed by Nick Jr. in South Carolina for the Gullah Gullah Island community scenes, but at Universal Studios in Orlando, Florida. It was broadcast internationally, and even today, my wife and I get responses from people around the world telling us about the impact that the show had on them because it was the first time that they saw people who looked like themselves, who spoke like themselves, and we were a real family on the show. My wife, Natalie, and our two children. Simeon was our TV son, and
Mhm.
our daughter, Sarah, was our TV daughter, Shayna's best friend. So we were this real family talking about a real culture or promoting a real culture to the world.
Thank you so much for that. So when I first heard Gullah Gullah or Gullah Geechee culture, it was at Morehouse. I
Uh-huh.
think this was probably in my either my sociology course or my religion course, one of them. And then recently, a friend of mine who was on the podcast, Dr. Daniel Harrison Green, was talking to me about Black culture. I want to say straight off that I am not originally from the U.S. I'm from the Caribbean, and during the time that I grew up in the Caribbean, St. Lucia specifically, um, it took a while before some American content would get to our TVs. Sometimes a few years before the content would get to us. So when my friend mentioned Gullah Gullah Island, she was like, Dr. Thomas, you remember Gullah Gullah Island? I'm like, what are you talking about? She's like, you didn't grow up watching Gullah Gullah Island? I'm like, I don't even know what that is. She's like, oh no, you must watch. Have you watched The Wiz? I'm like, the what? She's like, The Wiz. I'm like, I don't know anything about. She's like, oh, you have to watch this. So she said, you have to try to reach this guy who is the face for Gullah Geechee culture and is the star of Gullah Gullah Island. A younger colleague of mine from Morehouse, I spoke to him. I said, yeah, I spoke with Ron Daise, and he's agreed to be a guest on the podcast. And he said, Ron Daise? You were able to get Ron Days? Gullah Gullah Island. I grew up watching Gullah Gullah Island. I would run home from school every day. That's my jam from childhood, and I could just see the memories of his childhood flashing before his eyes as he was reminiscing. And it meant it didn't have that same meaning to me. It had more of an academic experience for me from the point of view of my studies. But I like the idea of connecting kids as young as preschool to a culture that is part of their history, and giving them access to that, but also giving them a portrayal of a family of people who look like them. And so help us understand how you went from St. Helena to Nickelodeon. How did that happen? That wasn't accidental.
Well, no, it was not accidental, but it
Mhm.
was not planned.
Okay.
And it was a matter of being in the right place at the right
Mm,
time and God opening up an opportunity and being able to step into it.
mhm,
As you mentioned, I'm a former newspaper reporter after
mhm,
graduating from Hampton Institute, now Hampton University in Virginia, and returning home to Beaufort County, South Carolina. I began working as a newspaper reporter. I did feature stories about many elder St. Helenians, sharing information about our culture and heritage, which at that time we spoke of as Sea Island
mm,
heritage.
mhm,
The words Gullah
mhm,
and Geechee, those were words used in circles of researchers,
mm,
academicians.
mhm,
It was a way of speech. But I was a proud Sea Islander. And after I left my job at the Beaufort Gazette, I
mhm,
continued gathering stories. And this collection of oral histories and old songs and historic pictures of St. Helenians from the late 1800s and early 1900s were included in my very first book, Reminiscences of Sea Island Heritage. And after that book was published, my wife and I performed, as a way of bringing the book to life, we
right.
developed a production. We traveled the country sharing these stories or doing dramatizations of these oral histories and singing the songs, just the two of us, a cappella,
Mhm,
spirituals and work songs. And soon after that, that was about the time when novelist Gloria Naylor, the
mhm,
writer of Mama Day, that book was published, and Gloria Naylor bought a home on St. Helena Island,
mhm,
and we became friends. Um, Mama Day was to be optioned as a Disney movie, and the woman who's to be the executive producer, a fellow graduate of Gloria Naylor's of Yale University, Maria Perez, uh, came to Beaufort along with Lawrence Fishburne, who was to be the director as well as the main character of Mama Day. And they were scouting for sites for filming this Disney, what would be a Disney movie. And
right.
on the last day of that visit, of their scout site scouting visit, my wife and I were invited to a dinner, and that's when the conversation began because Maria Perez said that she and her business partner in New York have been working on a children's program to pitch to Nick Jr. who was looking for multicultural programming. She was from Puerto Rico. I believe the plans for her show were for a Puerto Rican background. Um,
Mm,
and that is why on the show Gullah Gullah Island, there were a number of people of Hispanic and Latin heritage
mm,
on the show who came to Gullah Gullah Island. During that dinner conversation, Gloria Naylor and some others who gathered uh, expressed to Maria Perez that perhaps the show could center about this Gullah culture, which she
right,
was being introduced to for the first time. Perhaps it could be about some magical Gullah island. Would we be interested?
right.
We said yes. We had no
Wow,
ideas, no plans for a TV program, though
wow,
with our performance that we had created, which we call Sea Island Montage,
right.
there were numerous people who would say to us, this would be a good off Broadway production, or this could be a good TV idea. We just continued living our lives and doing what we do, and that is how it came to being. We thought, sure, nothing was going to happen to it, but true to her word, when she returned to New York, she spoke with her business partner, Kathy Minton, and they began conversing with us. They came down to Beaufort County and they followed us around, and the show more or less became about us, I realized, because
Hmm.
on the show, Mr. Ron is a newspaper reporter.
Right,
And Miss Natalie, who is an artist, does crafts.
right.
We actually sang to our children, and that's what we do on the show. And we introduced the producers as well as the world community to real life Gullah Geechee people. Um, as I said, the words Gullah and Geechee
Hmm.
weren't
Hmm.
used to define a
Right.
people at that time. Uh, the creative team, the producers, liked the word Gullah, and because it was a show for preschoolers with alliteration,
Yeah,
Gullah Gullah Island
yeah,
became the name of the show.
yeah.
So,
Thank
in
you
a
so much for that.
nutshell,
No,
and the
this is really
movie
good.
Mama Day never came into being, but Gullah Gullah Island was birthed.
That is beautiful. I love the serendipity that's happening throughout. For those who are listening and watching and are thinking back to different scenes and episodes of Gullah Gullah, and might have been wondering why certain characters were being brought in or were visiting,
Mhm.
to now hear some of the backstory for why this was happening, why some of these decisions were being made, must change and adjust the experience so much for them. That is really great. Thank you so
Yes,
much about that.
there are many, let me say, Gullah enthusiasts
Mm,
who, when the show came out, were saying, they were commenting that this was not a show about the real Gullah culture
right.
and history. It was a show for preschoolers. And although my wife and I have never, since the show began, asserted that we were the producers or the creators of the show,
Mhm.
that is what would sometimes end up in the media.
Mm.
But we were the stars and the cultural consultants for the show, and it, in fact, was framed after our real experiences and identities.
So that actually teased me off really well for um, this question. I think that's been bubbling in my mind for those who might not have grown up hearing about Gullah Geechee culture from the academic space, and hopefully you give us more accurate lived language. What exactly is Gullah Geechee culture? If you were to give us like three or four basics of what Gullah Geechee culture looks like, I hear you mention Sea Island. In the Caribbean, we talk about Sea Island cotton very often. Like, and
Yes.
so like hearing you say Sea Island, like, is that where that Sea Island cotton idea came from? So, what
Yes,
exactly
it
is
is.
Gullah Geechee, and what is
Gullah
this Sea Island?
Geechee, the words Gullah Geechee identify basically three things: a
Mhm,
language, a culture, and a group of people.
mhm,
People who were descendants primarily of West Africans
mm,
who were trafficked, transported from the rice coast countries of Africa, as well as from the Gold Coast countries
mhm,
of Africa and the West Central countries of Africa, and brought to what had been the Carolina and Georgia colonies.
okay.
In those colonies, cash crops were grown. There was cotton, and Sea Island cotton brought in the most cash.
Mhm,
There was indigo, from which we get the bluish purplish dye.
mhm,
And in communities where I now live, Georgetown, South Carolina, rice was
mm,
the king cash crop. And many people don't know when they think about enslavement or the period of enslavement, they generally only think about cotton or
mm,
tobacco.
mhm,
They don't know about rice,
mhm,
but the kind of rice that was grown in the communities of Georgetown, South Carolina, Charleston, South Carolina, and parts of Georgia, the cash crop was rice. And
mm,
the type of rice that was grown was Carolina gold rice.
hmm,
It was gold golden when it was ready for harvest as it
right.
grew in the fields. And it was golden because it made the enslavers filthy rich.
Wealthy. Okay.
Their wealth rivaled the wealth of European royalty
Wow.
at that time.
Wow.
And the production of this rice by the hundreds of thousands of West
Wow.
Africans who were brought for the production came because of their skills and knowledge in West African tidal rice production.
Hmm.
It could not have been done without them.
It's interesting that you mentioned the hundreds of thousands of Black enslaved people who were responsible for enriching the pockets of white colonialists, to the point where their wealth was rivaling that of royalty in Europe. And today, I've heard a couple of conversations, and there's this trend, this building wave where people are questioning whether or not this period of enslavement of Black people ever really happened, and whether the numbers of people who are quote unquote being claimed to have been enslaved could ever have really been that number. What would you say to
It is the truth. And
that? I mean,
if
that's
they
simple
look
enough.
and if they look throughout history
Right.
or look at, they will be able to validate its occurrence, and they would also realize that unlike it, there are those who want to purport that it never happened.
Mhm.
There are others who want to purport that it wasn't like that.
Mm. It wasn't as
The
bad.
that the slave owners, the
Mhm.
plantation owners, treated their slaves
Mhm.
as their own,
Mhm.
as and that is a bold-faced lie. And many of them they were, how shall I put it? Um, they were very fierce, they
Mm.
were very vindictive, they were very controlling
Mhm.
in their efforts to. That's what chattel slavery, which
Yes.
was in America, chattel slavery was the first type of slavery in which people were treated as property.
Mm.
They were not considered humans. And in a sense, that is a sense that a number of people want to return to,
Right.
where Black people, people of color, people of African descent would realize that they are not to be treated as human
Mm.
beings. They are not worthy of being treated as humans, and that others are superior. But what's found, and what I think an impact of Gullah Gullah Island,
Mhm.
in that it mirrored a real history, a real culture. It showcased that the foodways, the language, the art, the spirituality, the music
Mm.
of Gullah Geechee people helped to shape all of American culture and the fabric of American culture.
Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate the distinction that you make between chattel slavery that existed in America versus other kinds of slavery. Because the usual quip when you mention slavery is, well, I mean, all cultures that were superior, quote unquote, uh, had a form of slavery. When people went to war, they would capture people and those people became slaves. That is not the slavery that we're talking about. That is not the
No,
enslavement that we're talking about. We're
because
talking
in other
about a more
cultures,
insidious white superiority kind of a slavery that treated the individual not as a volunteer or a person who's made a decision to go into it, but as, or even as a captured individual in a war, but treated them as property. You belonged to me and you are no longer a person.
correct. And even in traditional African culture and society, where slavery existed, where members of different warring tribes
Mhm.
were captured, they were the captives remained prisoners or enslaved for a set
Mm.
period of
Yeah.
time. And they could, in fact, after that period of time, they became members of that
Mm.
particular
Mhm.
tribal group. And for those African countries to whom Europeans, when they began to invade Africa, and wanted to enslave members of their particular tribal groups or members of other tribal groups, initially there was a sense of, okay, this is slavery, this is what has been done,
Mhm.
the same thing will be done here, but that was
Right.
not the case.
Yeah. Yeah. We're living in an era of book bans and curriculum erasure and cultural revisionistic versions of history. What are you seeing happening to Black history education in this era?
There is a growing sense of realizing that this must be challenged.
Hmm.
And in although in whatever particular areas of our lives where this had been an accepted kind of thing, we must now look for new roads, new ways to make sure that our children
Mm.
continue to be aware of our history, the importance of their own heritages, and their value as human beings.
And so, how do you see Black fathers becoming part of that conversation? Because I think we often think that the nurturing of children, that's the woman's role, that's the mom's role, that's grandma's role. What Why is it especially important for Black fathers to be cultural keepers and storytellers for their children right now?
Black fathers must always be ready to share with children, their own children, members of their families and their communities about their lives, about their known history, and about the history or of life that they have discovered as they have matured.
Mm.
Um, Many may not know much about their own family
Yeah.
histories,
Yeah.
but they can find out. And once they do, they can share that information with their children. Uh, Information about things that they learned later in life that they wish they had known as
Mm.
children,
Mhm.
failures that they have made and overcome. They can share those with their children so that they can know that resilience is a possibility. Um, Share about their faith. They should share their family medical
Yeah.
histories,
Yeah.
what illnesses, what challenges members of their immediate family have had to deal with, because later on in their children's
Yeah.
lives, they too may need to deal with these same kinds of concerns, but they'll have no idea that, oh, this is something that occurred with my uncle.
Right.
And because there are a number of blended families now, that's even more important
Yeah.
to make sure that children and their siblings know exactly what life has in store for them to deal with, for them to overcome, and more importantly, for them to celebrate.
I really appreciate that, especially the point about sharing family medical history, because that is a major concern in, of course, medical settings, that you have people coming in having certain symptoms, and without any understanding of where some of those symptoms might be connected to their DNA, what's passed down in blood to them through their family, and being surprised and then going back home and either not choosing to share it, so continuing the lineage of silence, or eventually sharing and realizing my granddad had this. Why didn't anybody tell me? Maybe if you had told me this when I was young, I might have eaten differently. I might have done some different
Correct.
things, engaged in more preventative medicine earlier when they first started
Correct.
seeing symptoms. They could have been saved. And the reason that they would have come in earlier is, had they known that there was
Correct.
high risk in our family, then you could have started your screenings earlier. You would have started
Yes.
your treatments earlier. You would have started asking questions. You would have told your doctor when
Mhm.
you're reporting your medical history. A number of my medical friends who say that sometimes their black clients come in and they can't finish up the medical history report that you
Right.
present when you working with a particular medical provider, because they don't know. Did your mom have any of these? I don't know.
Right.
Did your dad have any of them? I don't know. I can't ask him either. I don't know where he is. Or if I ask, they won't tell me. And in some cases, if I ask, they don't have the language for it.
Mhm.
And so I love the idea of being able to share all of that history with our children.
Others
Like,
can
sorry, go
begin
ahead.
to create a list, their own
Right,
list. These are the illnesses,
right.
whatever they may be. These are the relatives who have dealt with it. If they are aware the age
Hmm.
that that particular relative or they themselves were diagnosed with it, and also what medications were they placed on. And if, in fact, because of these illnesses, the particular relative died,
Hmm.
they need to note the
Yeah,
age that
yeah,
that individual passed
right.
so that their children may be aware, oh, if I don't clear this up
Hmm.
early, because children think they live forever as they become old and
Yep,
they realize, okay, this is a family dynamic
right.
that I need to be aware of and take condition my life so that I'm not on this same timeline
Right.
that other family members who may not have been aware of what they could do, what changes they could have made, can make.
So I appreciate that on Gullah Gullah Island, um, you were talking about how this pretty much ended up being a story of your family. You had close kin involved. It somehow connected to your own life, to your wife's life, where it so beyond being a story about a black family, it was a story of a black family
It
of you
was.
in one way or another. And so I'm thinking this show taught about culture through joy, which is something that's very lacking today. Uh, Music, food, stories. I'm not expecting fathers to go out there and recreate Gullah Gullah Island, but every father has a small um, studio in their hand, whether it's through TikTok or through CapCut or some other recording device. They have a little studio in their hand. Are there ways that fathers can replicate the Gullah Gullah experience for their children at home?
Sure, the first year. And as I said, the producers, the creative team, followed my wife and I around for about a week. One of the things that they saw on Sunday mornings,
Hmm.
I would bake biscuits. And
Mm.
my mother would bake biscuits before we got, as we were getting ready to go to church. So I would bake biscuits. And that's why on the first season, Big Fat Biscuits
Hmm.
is one of the songs. And that's what it's based on.
Big
Um,
fat biscuit.
Many of the songs from particularly the first and second year
Right.
were based on the spirituals that my wife and I sang or we brought to the attention of the producers, and they jazzed those tunes
Right.
up, but they're based on the songs of my community. Um, I shared with the producers and the creative team members of the St. Helena Island community, real life
Mm.
Sea Islanders known today as Gullah Geechee people, shrimpers, fishermen, uh, gardeners, and they would hear the speech of these people, which was different
Hmm.
from the speech of other Black Americans because of our West African
Mm.
heritage. I'm sure that there are listeners who are aware of the family pet. Binya Binya Pollywog. Binya Binya was a large yellow pollywog, and that character was based on the producer's heritage of it was a tree frog called a
Mm.
coquille, I
Hmm.
believe. And they asked for different Gullah words and expressions. One of them that I presented was Binya. I'm a
Hmm.
Binya. Anyone who's a native of a Gullah Geechee community who has lived here, been here, or been here is known as a
Mm.
Binya. If you come into a Gullah Geechee community relocating from elsewhere in the universe, you'll never be called a Binya. You're called a
Mm.
Kumya. So Binya, Binya, Pollywog. And
Ah.
again, because the word is doubled when speaking Gullah
Right.
Geechee, it means very much so. You can be hungry. But if you're really hungry, you're hungry,
Hungry,
hungry.
hungry.
If
Ah.
or you could be hungry, hungry, hungry. That means you're about to die from hunger. So
Right.
Binya Pollywog then supposedly lived in this Gullah community, this fictional Gullah Gullah Island, for
Right.
a very long time. I shared with them because I think about the third season, there was a puppet called it was a pelican. They
Mm.
asked for names. I gave the name, one of the names I suggested was Chansom. In Gullah Geechee culture and heritage, as you may be aware of your Caribbean
Hmm.
heritage, people were given basket names. These
Hmm.
are names given to them at the time of birth
Right.
because of some physical features, some occurrence
Right.
that may have happened at the time of birth. Now, when my father was born, he was the oldest survivor. Other children had died at childbirth or soon thereafter. The midwife who delivered him said, thought he was strong enough and said, "Well, we gonna chance him." So his name
Mm.
was Chansom. We'll take a chance
Right,
on his
right.
surviving.
Wow.
So Chansom was the name that was selected for Chansom Pelican.
Wow.
Sharing those kinds of things with your children, the different names from childhood, the different actions of family members, those are very important things that fathers can pass on to their children. They may not understand it. They
Right.
may think it's just a bunch, stuff they don't need to, but there will come a time in their lives like they'll think, oh, this helps them to grab onto their past so that they can move forward to their future. It'll be a Sankofa moment
Mm.
for them.
The first time I heard of marzipan, I was probably maybe about 10 years old. I had never seen it. I would not
Hmm.
see marzipan for the first time until I was probably about 12 or 13 years old. But I have always and I continue to associate marzipan with my grandmother because of the
Hmm.
stories that I would hear that at Christmas and for weddings, she was the go to baker. She would make what we call black cake in the Caribbean, a rich
Right.
fruit cake with rum and raisins and dried fruit in there. And she would cover it with marzipan and decorate it brilliantly, beautifully, full of color, and that cake could sit for more than a year without deteriorating. And so every
Right.
so often I watch a baking show and I hear marzipan and I think, oh,
That's right.
mom made she made her own marzipan. Mom could compete on the Great British Bake Off and she probably would win. She's no longer with us, but I the
Right.
memory of her is always refreshed by stories about baking, and I bake because I feel like there's that connection to her as well. Can you
Mhm.
give fathers maybe three ways that they could this week um, connect historically with their children, connect family history, whatever, create that history with their children?
Well,
And I know you talked about
no, no, no.
the
What?
big fat biscuits. So the big I love the idea of big fat. I don't know why. I love the idea of big fat biscuits. So a father could go buy big fat biscuits with his kid and walk and eat and talk about biscuits. Or a father could
Right.
make or could buy whatever, something around big fat biscuits, or they could find something different. What some other
Or
practical things that fathers could do.
fathers who fish,
Right, right.
or enjoy fishing, they can talk about their memories.
Mm,
Perhaps they went fishing with a family member,
yeah.
their father, their grandfather, an uncle, or a member of the community, and they can share with their children the significance
Hmm.
of it for them. Just whatever stories they can ask their if they ask their children, just pick a topic,
Hmm.
and ask their children why this is important to their child,
Hmm.
and then turn back. Okay, well, this is important to me because of such and such. And that will be helpful as well. If there are old songs
Hmm.
from their childhood, childhood games
Hmm.
that they would play, they should share that with them. If there are words that they remember, that you know that they were not, for some reason, they were not allowed to
Right,
say in their home or in their
right.
community. If their child is of a certain age, they can share that with them. Sometimes it can be a laughing matter because today that word can mean something entirely different
Yep.
and altogether positive.
Yep. A friend of mine was recently sharing that he has about um, more than 2,000 Pokemon cards. And then there were some other cards that he collected because his grandmother told him that he should collect these cards, and he collected them with her. And he says, I
Mhm.
haven't touched these cards. They're still in pristine order and put away in their little box or whatever. And he hasn't touched them for years. And he has a son who is now 7, 8 years old. And guess what his son is interested in?
The
Pokemon.
Pokemon.
And so he
Right.
shares these memories that were passed down through his memories with his grandmother. Now he's sharing this with his son. I've heard of fathers say, I loved not Care Bears. What's the one with Lionel? I loved He Man, or I loved any
Okay.
one of those cartoons, and I can't wait to once my son is old enough. I can't wait to sit and watch it with him all over again, and watch his eyes light up when He Man raises his sword and says, "By the power of Grayskull," and he turns into He Man,
Right.
and
Right.
the leopard changes. I can't wait to see his eyes light up. I can't wait to see him running around doing the power of grace call thing as well, like I did when I was
Hmm.
a kid. That creates connection. That creates uh, intimacy between yourself and your
Correct.
child. And that creates avenue for more conversations. That creates space for getting to know each other.
And as children develop from birth to toddler to teen,
Hmm.
their features change, and their features mirror different features of members of both
Yes.
family
Yes.
members, immediate and otherwise. And when that happens, fathers should be prepared to tell their children,
Yeah.
oh, you are acting like
Hmm.
your uncle or your aunt so and so. Are
Hmm.
you smiling just like so and
Hmm.
so? Or when you get angry, just
Yeah.
that's like, and that gives them a connection
Yes.
with their family
Yeah.
members. And many Black families are so far away from each other, and coming together for reunions,
Mm.
family reunions, sometimes is not a possibility.
Yeah.
But in those ways, you can share your personal heritage
Yeah.
with your family.
It feels like we tell stories intentionally at funerals
Yeah.
when we meet up to
Hmm.
socialize and support each other. But those stories don't seem to exist at other spaces. I
Right.
love the idea of being able to deliberately create some of this space. And I know that you're continuing to teach about Gullah Geechee culture. You have some current work, specifically the Geechee literature series, some
Right.
performances. Tell us how you're continuing to do this teaching through these avenues.
There's a term used about edutainment. You
Mm-hmm.
educate through some type of entertainment
Right.
and sharing stories as a conversation. And that's a production that I'm working on now to present for Spoleto, which is a
Mm-hmm.
big festival in Charleston, in June and July, I believe. And I called this Low Country Inspirations, where I will share with audience members things from my childhood that inspired me to do the writings
Mm.
or to create the exhibitions that I have, or to write the songs or the poetry that are part of my Geechee literature series, or in fact to tell about my inspirations for Mr. Ron's Gullahlicious Pound Cakes, because that's what I
I
produce
saw those.
on on Etsy.com. And in fact, like my first one, that was because my mother baked a particular pound cake.
Right.
It was always when children and grandchildren, there was always this pound cake on the
Mm.
table. And that's a memory of a lot of grandchildren, my nieces and nephews. And that was what I launched Mr. Ron's Gullicious Pound Cakes with. But there are other pound cakes.
How
And,
did you come up with the
even there,
name?
how did I come up with that name?
That's what I want to know.
My wife came up with that name because I would
Of
always
course.
bake. I would be the one with the pound cakes for the family gatherings, and people would be looking for them. When we were filming Gullah Gullah Island at different holidays like Christmas time, I would bake a pound cake, send it to the producers.
Mm.
And my wife had, well, you should bake these and make them, and sell them. And we could call it, you know, Gullalicious. That's the time. Bootylicious was the song that came out.
I was wondering
Call
about
it
that.
Gullalicious or something like that. And it works because it's Gullah as it's the deliciousness
Mm.
and the celebration of this particular foodways. And customers love them. They ship across the United States. um, the the language itself, because as I was growing up, no one wanted to be identified as Gullah or Geechee because
Mm.
that was considered bad English, broken
Yeah.
English,
Yeah.
substandard English. And because my parents were graduates of Penn School, started before the Civil War began on St. Helena Island. It's one of the first schools for freed, enslaved people. One of the first schools in this country, in the South. And uh, because my mother, after graduating from Penn School, became one of the island teachers at one room schoolhouses, we were always taught to speak English
Mm.
correctly. I spoke elegantly. I spoke polished, I thought. But when I went to Hampton, uh, Hampton, which was like 3 states away, Hampton
Right.
Institute, the first day in the cafeteria, I heard talking at the table behind me, and I wondered who from St. Helena had come that I didn't know about. And these were students from the Caribbean
Right.
islands, from Jamaica, the Virgin Islands, etc. And we had the same speech patterns. And also, we carried ourselves
Mm.
differently because we were island people.
Mm.
And people could, wherever I went, people would hear a difference in my
Yeah.
speech. But I was always a proud Sea Islander. I would not say that I was Gullah or Geechee because I didn't think I spoke Gullah
Right.
or Geechee. And then, as of 2006, with the establishment of the Gullah Geechee Cultural Heritage Corridor, we realized that Gullah Geechee culture spans not only the Sea Island communities of Georgia and South Carolina, but also some of the coastal mainland communities stretching all the way from Wilmington, North Carolina, down throughout South Carolina and Georgia to St. Augustine, Florida. And the rice heritage of our ancestors, our speechway, our foodways, our beliefs, our customs, etc., our music,
Mm.
all continue to this day.
Thank you so much, Ron, for that. So the remaining questions are lightning questions. So they
Okay.
require either a quick one word response or one sentence response, max 30 seconds. So don't no, no, I know this is always the challenge for all of my guests when we get to this point. They're like, oh, I want to explain this. So try to pull yourself in. Um, one book that every father should read to his children.
One book that every father should read to the Okra Stew by my wife, Natalie Daise.
Your wife will be proud. good, good rescue on yourself there. Uh, one place that every Black family should visit to connect with heritage.
The International African American Museum in Charleston, South Carolina.
Mm, mm. If Gullah Gullah Island came back today, what would it be about? Yes, yes. This one is making you think.
Because I need to be quick. It will be about Gullah the Portal.
Hmm. Hmm. Okay. I
I
want
will.
to.
I'll finish that if you allow me
Yes.
to
Go ahead. Go
explain.
ahead.
Ask
Because
questions to
now,
explain.
now,
But it will be
now I'm
about
intrigued.
Gullah the
Right.
Portal.
Hmm. Go on.
Oh, well, one, uh, my daughter Sarah McKeever, historian, author. One of her writings is "The South is a Portal."
Mm.
You understand American history through understanding the South in a nutshell. And my son Simeon is developing a show called Gullah the Portal, which is a jump off for adults who watched Gullah Gullah Island as a child with an understanding of the rich heritage of Gullah Geechee culture from an adult's point of view. And hopefully that will be in development soon. Gullah the Portal.
We'll be looking out for that. And final question: after 40 years of cultural preservation, what do you want to say to Black fathers right now about their responsibility to their children in this moment where our history is under attack?
Fathers, your presence is important. Your physical presence, your emotional presence, and your support. Because even at times when you may find that your children are rebelling and
Mm,
don't want anything to do with you, there will come a time that they return.
yeah.
And they can know that they need to know that you are always loving and that you are proud of who they are becoming, and who they have become.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much again for this really, really excellent conversation, Ron. This was Ron Daise. Thank you so much for being with us. So, this episode is truly a bridge between past and future, between a beloved children's show and the urgent work of fatherhood today. Ron Daise spent his life making sure that Gullah children knew who they were, that Black children felt connected to their history. And now, in this moment where Black history is under attack, every Black father must do the same. Thank you very much for joining us. You've been listening to the Black Father's Pulse. I'm your host, Dr. Alvin Thomas. I'm a clinical psychologist, researcher, and director of the TriLab at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Views shared on this podcast are mine or that of my guest and are not associated with the university. Original music for our series was composed and performed by Micaiah De Silva, artwork by Isabella Acra. The podcast is produced by me and is supported by the kind contributions of you, the public, and advertisers. Follow me on Twitter at Dr_AT758, that's Dr_AT758, or the Black Fathers Pulse podcast on Instagram and YouTube. Subscribe to the Black Fathers Pulse podcast wherever you do your podcast listening, and don't forget to share and leave us a positive review.